Welcome to another episode of our Founders Podcast. I'm your host, Ash, and this is a show where I interview proven founders and industry experts who share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you build, launch, and grow your business. In this episode, I talk to Zach, founder of Yembo AI. Zach currently wears multiple hats as the CTO and co founder of Yembo AI, an innovative company on a mission to revolutionize home service companies with cutting edge AI products. But that's not all. Zach's expertise doesn't stop at co founding a dynamic startup. He's also an accomplished author, having penned the insightful book Grow Up Fast, which dwells into fascinating world of AI entrepreneurship. With Zach's wealth of knowledge and experience, I'm convinced that this episode is featuring him would be bring immense value. So I hope you enjoy. Okay, Zach, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ash. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. Do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you would like to share with us?
Sure. There's a line that I find myself repeating all the time, and I think we'll be able to talk about it more. And that is the first version of your product is not as good as you think it is. And I know it's really maybe hard to hear, but when you're starting something, it's there's like an incentive to declare victory as soon as it works end to end.
Yeah,
But the road is long and it's not done at that point. So we can chat more about it. But I think the sooner you make your peace with that fact, the better it'll be.
indeed, indeed. So tell us about Yembo AI then. What does the product do? Who is it for? And what's the main problem you're helping to solve?
Sure. So Yembo solves this problem that's general to the home services industry. And with home services, think about moving or property insurance or these kinds of industries. Somebody usually needs to physically inspect, come to your house and look to give you a quote. So it's unlike other areas that have been kind of accelerated or grown by e-commerce, things like that, because everything's custom. I can
Mm,
go on Amazon, I can buy like a $2 toothbrush, and then I can get it showing up at my door the next day. It gets tracked all along the way. But that's
mhm.
because that manufacturer made a toothbrush and it's like one size fits all.
Yeah.
But in home services, if you want to, let's say, move me from California to London, you would need to come and look at, okay, there's books on the shelves, how many boxes? Okay, I'd have to pack up that sofa. Do I need a 16-foot truck? If it's an international move, maybe there's a s- a seat container it needs to go on
Yeah.
across the ocean, all these kinds of things. So it's a very labor intensive and kind of tedious process, but really
Hmm.
important to get right, right? If I just guess what you have and show up with the wrong equipment or the wrong size crew, it's going to be a disaster. So what Yembo does is we provide computer vision technology to the service provider. We started with the moving industry and we've added on in addition to that we're serving property insurance as well now. And rather than having an in-person visit where someone has to walk around and identify everything, you can scan quick 20 or so second videos of each room in your house. Our AI will identify what's in that video, give you a summary of here are the images, here's the items. In the moving product, we give you volume and weight estimates because that's what it takes to do a move. In property
Mm,
insurance, the data points are slightly different.
mhm.
And then the mover can have this result. They can review it. They can have a conversation with the customer. It's faster, it's more accurate, and you're able to, if you're a moving company, you're able to turn around more quotes in a day because you're not spending as much time sitting in traffic, driving around, counting boxes. You're able to kind of focus on the higher value aspects of running a sales organization in a home service business. So that's what we provide.
Awesome, awesome. And while you were explaining it to me, I was just thinking, um, I have seen this thing on one of the listings where you can see the house inside in a 3D way. Is it something similar, or Yambo AI is more focused on the data and the space and other things?
So Yembo is focused on extracting insights out of that video. The
Right.
specific insights vary from product to product. Our
Mhm.
moving product is mostly focused on 2D because movers more are interested in like give me the list of furniture. We
Mhm.
are working on some newer areas in the insurance space where we do 3D reconstruction and build 3D models, and that's powerful for use cases where you need to actually measure. Um, if you need to like tap on 2 points and see like how many square feet of drywall, all those kinds of things. then
Mm.
getting down to meters or feet and inches actually matters. So we have like this library of capabilities at the company, but this is one key part we'll kind of chat about more, I'm sure. But we want to make sure that it's valuable to the end user. I mean, as engineers, we think AI is cool, and it's probably because it is. But at
Mm.
the end of the day, the customer cares about their workflow. So they don't
Indeed.
want just an AI algorithm. They need something they can log into, they can use. They want to be able to message the customer. They want to be able to get the quote and turn it around.
Yeah.
So I feel like the AI is kind of like the engine, but the actual value to the customer is an outcome that AI enables. They don't really care about AI. They care about being able to do 3 to 5 times as many quotes in a day.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. So let's talk about where the story began. Where did the idea for Yembo came from?
Sure. So the idea for Yembo came, I feel like a lot of startups probably start this way. And
Mm-hmm.
as a founder, when you find yourself sitting at the intersection of two different worlds and you realize that you have something new, that's kind of where the spark came. So I'm an engineer by training, went to school for computer engineering, worked at a big tech company right out of college. So I've always been an engineer for basically my entire adult life. And at my day job, I was looking at new emerging areas of technology, and deep learning, AI, computer vision was the topic that our team was tasked with looking at. So I was going to conferences and trade shows and looking at what startups are out there, and it was really invigorating. I mean, people had so many different ideas, so many different use cases that previously people thought were impossible were now becoming possible because AI was improving and making these use cases able to be done. Things like self-driving cars and drones.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my wife was working at a moving company. So by day, I'd be having these like mind-blowing experiences around all the different cool things that AI could do. And then I'd come home and my wife would tell me about these problems that came up around if a job was not estimated correctly, or
Mm.
just how much work it takes when everything does go well to be able to get it right. I mean, think of it this way: if it takes 65 cartons to move your house and I show up with 64, that is actually a huge operational issue because I have
Mm.
to leave, go buy more. That like it throws your cost structure out of whack, or I have to ask you to like throw some things out, and it's just not a great
Yeah.
customer experience. Or I just cram it in, and there's risk something breaks. And it's a relatively little detail, right? Like if a typical move has maybe 300, 400 items in it,
Mm.
and I bring one box too few. This is the entire home service industry. It's not just moving. Even if you're like a plumber or a painter, like these kinds of details matter, and that's where we saw an opportunity where you could take these advancements that were happening in computer vision, and you could bring them to an industry that kind of needs it because they're not able to they're not able to effectively give these estimates. And a lot of the work that AI can do, it's like maybe a general learning that we found, is that if AI, um, it's not magic. It can do things. If you look at a video, if a trained person could look at it and tell what's there, the AI can be trained. But if it's not there, AI will never tell you what's behind that closet door, for instance. It's just not here. It doesn't know. It can guess, but it's not going to be accurate.
Mm.
Um, but what AI can do is it can do it much more faster and much more effectively. So
Indeed.
if you look at our actual quotes when we give things back, one of our first clients, when they first saw one of these estimates that we give, they were kind of mind blown because we put pictures of each item that's there. So we don't just say in this room there's a sofa. You'll see like the actual blue sofa chair with a picture and a dot on it, and the dot is labeled sofa chair. And what was happening was they the prospect assumed that a person had done it, and the feedback was like, "Oh my gosh, who on earth has the time to go through and take each image and label and draw the dot on it? Like, it's not cost effective to do that." But what they didn't realize, it was an algorithm doing it, not people. So you get this better, more robust experience, but it's not out of reach anymore. If you had to have a person in manual labor doing it, then it would be. But because we have computer vision, we're able to kind of unlock these use cases that makes everyone's experience better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm also thinking now, while you were explaining it to me, that when somebody resells their house, they have to go to these mortgage companies, and then before these lenders approve their refinancing on loan, they
Hmm.
send a surveyor to your house. What that surveyor does is it comes to your house, he measures the wall to wall distances, he measures the quality of the walls, if it's not broken or what upgrades you have done, and then he comes back with an estimation that this much you can borrow against this property. I'm guessing this product would be really good for that kind of use case, because then the person doesn't have to come. It's just the homeowner who can just scan and send that to the surveyor, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that those are exactly the kinds of use cases we're looking at.
Yeah.
We like to say, I think like most startups, we're not idea constrained, we're execution constrained. I feel like for
Mm.
each idea I have, it's like 2 years of catch up work to actually go make it real, make it happen.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the whole thing we've learned about this space is moving is was the first market that we entered into. But the more we learned about the general industries, because when people move, they have a lot of other needs, right? They usually go and remodel or they'll paint, or there's a lot of other um, activities that happen inside the home that moving is like the trigger point for. And the more we learned, the more we realized everybody has these issues where that person needs to come out and take all these measurements because that's the best way to get an accurate estimate. But what I think is starting to change now is processing power has gotten better. Everyone's got smartphones. The abilities of these smartphones are getting better and better, and
Mm,
a better way is emerging. 5 years ago, you'd be crazy for saying some of these use cases that we're comprehending now, but like
mm,
the technology is not a static point. Things are not black and white, possible and impossible. Like what is possible changes over time. So that's what I think
indeed.
is pretty exciting about the space now is it's just so many use cases are coming out that were ludicrously ambitious even
Mm,
months ago, but then some fundamental shift changes and now it's like, oh yeah, there's a service that'll do that for $5 a month. And like these the pace of innovation is just speeding up so much faster than anything I've seen before.
sure, sure. And I totally get that, because being a founder, you're always looking for what you can understand and what you have learned in your experience, right? But
Mhm.
then when you have a product in place, you talk to people and they're like, oh, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this. And there's lots of possibility, but it's all about how you can implement those features or evolve your product, Great,
Mhm.
great. So Zach, I'm eager to learn more about the person behind this innovative venture. Can you take us back to your like roots? Share with our listeners about your upbringing, your childhood, and how did your early experiences shape your journey and eventually led you to become the visionary entrepreneur?
Sure. I think there's a lot of different things that kind of led to this, and everyone's path is going to be a little bit different. But I mean, for me, I've always been interested in doing a startup. I mean, I was kind of a nerdy kid growing up, and I would read a lot of books, and I actually would like practice writing code. We had a family computer relatively early on. My dad worked in graphic design in the early '90s, and his company gave him a Mac like I think this was like 1992 or 3, so I was pretty young, and and we just kind of grew up with a computer in the house. And I remember there was one evening where my parents were washing the dishes. It was after dinner time. I think my siblings were getting ready for bed, and I was
Mm,
supposed to be, but I was sitting up on the family computer in Photoshop, and
mm,
I had the pencil tool, and I wasn't really like doing anything that cool. I just kind of like doodling the mouse, scribbling around. I think I'm like maybe 3 or 4 years old. It's weird to me. This is maybe one of my first memories as a
mm,
human being. But I'm doodling around with the pencil tool, and
mhm,
I overhear my parents arguing about it. And my mom is saying, "Hey, Zach needs to get ready for bed. And
mm.
by the way, you need to teach him to use a real pencil, not this like fake computer pencil." And my dad is saying, "No, no, no, you gotta let him do this because he's growing up in a world that we didn't grow up in, and this is gonna be the future." And I thanked my dad for that afterwards, and he said it was super weird that my I had remembered
Yeah.
it, but like it kind of worked out. But I think this mindset that happened just growing up, like having early access to it.
Mm,
Again, I wasn't like a Mozart prodigy kid or anything like that. I think I just had early access so that when everybody else was kinda catching up a couple years later, I had, like, a slight advantage maybe. So then
mm,
when things like Director and Macromedia, was it Shockwave came out, and Flash, like, I was already, kind of like dabbling around and go to the library and get books and like play around with it. So I feel
Mm,
like when my peers in school were like playing the games, I was trying to figure out how to make the games, and like one thing kind of led to another. And I remember in high school there was a copy of I think it was a Time magazine article, but the iPod had just come out with the color screen. I think it was called iPod Photo, and it was
mhm,
there was a feature that art that was done, and I was maybe 15 years old. Like my parents were just telling me, "Oh, you got to start thinking about college. What do you want to major in?" And I was like, "Gosh, I don't know." And I remember I came home from school and there was this magazine lying around. I don't think I even really read the article, but the cover image had a piece of graph paper with a sketch of the iPod. So there was like Johnny Ive, Steve Jobs, like the whole executive team, and this picture. And the thing that just struck me was somebody drew that. So this like product that everyone has and everyone talks about, like it was designed. Somebody had an idea, they like sketched it out, they shared it with their colleagues, they figured it out, and it kind of like blew my mind. I remember like
mm,
when the next morning I was making my Eggo waffles and I'm looking at the toaster and like that switch, that knob, that button, it was designed. Somebody thought about what's the problem I'm trying to solve. They put it together, they figured out the materials, they figured out the user experience, they brought it all together. And I didn't even know the right, like, word for the term, but I was like, "That's what I wanna do." And then later I learned that, there's computer science and computer engineering and electrical engineering. I kinda, like, picked, I didn't wanna pick, so I picked computer engineering because that meant you could do electrical and software. Um, and I feel like my whole career coming out of that has always been, like, trying to be broad and having these, experiences that are outside of, kind of like the narrow focus that's expected. And I feel
mm.
like that's where innovation really happens is you not always making brand new things, but, like, borrowing a concept from in two worlds that don't really collide beforehand. AI and moving, never no one was really talking about that before Yembo. And I feel like that's really where like the rubber meets the road is at the intersection of two things that you can uniquely position yourself at.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And I'm guessing that your family had quite a lot of influence on you while you were growing up, or motivating, not just motivating, but also giving you the capability or resources around your home or schooling area where you used to play with your friends, that you must be talking with your friends and saying, oh, I have seen this particular software on a computer, whereas in their world they might have not even seen a MacBook, right?
Right.
That leverage. So that's really good, because that gives you a lot of understanding, even though you don't know all the nitty-gritties of what's going on in the background, but you at least have seen it. It's a big thing.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. I mean, a lot of the practical skills that you pick up as an engineer, you can get them in maybe not professional ways. I think
Mm.
I learned a lot about networking by trying to set up StarCraft LAN parties when I was in middle school. We have a friend over, and oh, I can't ping your IP address. Like, you wouldn't just go study that for fun, but if you want to play a game, now there's an incentive to figure these
Yeah.
kinds of things out. And I feel like it's a great way to kind of connect the dots and
Mm.
explore. And also when you're a kid, you don't have to like worry about being productive all the time. You're kind of expected to hang out and have fun, and we don't have these pressures until we become adults. But I feel like the
Yeah.
other key part about it is this whole concept of constraints. And I feel like constraints get a bad rap where people like to compare themselves to other companies, other organizations, and they say, "Oh, I don't have the resources of them. I can't do that." But I've learned that constraints are actually super helpful because they make you focus. So you were talking about childhood. You
Mm.
vanished a little bit in the
Did it?
Zoom back.
Oh.
There you go. Hey, you're back. Okay. But but I think when it comes to growing up, we had one family computer, and I have two siblings. So naturally, there's a multiplexing problem, right? Where you have to
I
figure
can
out who's
understand.
gonna who's gonna use
Yeah.
it. So I remember what my siblings would get frustrated with me because I would start writing games. I was playing around in Flash, and if you're worked in the software industry at all, you make mistakes. There are bugs, they come up. It's hard to fix them sometimes. So it's really hard if somebody says, "Hey Zach, when will you be done?" If I'm watching
Mm.
a movie, I can go look. Okay, there's 20 minutes left in the movie. I'll be done in 20. If
Mm.
I'm trying to fix code that doesn't work, it could be 10 minutes. It could be 5 years. I don't. Somewhere in between there.
Yeah.
So we it became an issue over and over again. Exactly.
Yeah. I
But
was just giving it a, yeah, visual. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I couldn't agree more with you, Zach, on this one. Yeah.
so what happens is, so we're running into this issue over and over again. It becomes a problem. My parents get involved and they say, okay, you get a time allotment. You each get, I don't remember, it's like an hour, 2 hours a day. So when you get there, there's a little timer that went by the computer. You have to press it, and when it beeps at the end, you got to give it up. You're done for the day. It's very
Mm.
difficult if you want to write code with that kind of pressure, right? And they go, I've got 10 minutes left. I got to fix it. So what I did was I went to the local dollar store and I got this big yellow legal pad. And
Mm-hmm.
before it was my turn, I would take a pencil and I would write out my code, and then I'd look at it. It's like try to run it in my head because I want to make the most use of my hour, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to get there and then like waste it all and have nothing to show at the end. And that skill set actually paid off like probably multiple times down the road. I got to college and exams were that way, and all my friends were kind of complaining like, "Oh, who would ever write code on paper? This is so dumb." And
Mm.
went through it, and it was like, "Oh, this is something I've done before." Or when you're solving like a really hard problem, and you're trying to like maybe you are at a computer, but you're like kind of writing line by line, thinking where are the results going wrong, but
Mm.
that like concept was totally born out of a constraint. If we had infinite dollars and a computer for every person and no constraints, like it would have allowed me to um, not have that discipline, and then it would have like not given that benefit down the road. So
Yeah.
in the moment, I don't think I would have said this is fantastic. I love this, but looking back in hindsight, it kind of it forced something good to come out of it. So I feel like constraints, it's hard to see in the moment, but when you come out of them afterwards and look back, that's when you can usually see the benefit.
Indeed, indeed. And we learn so much in our childhood, and we use that learning in our whole adulthood so many times, but we don't realize it that where we actually got these habits and everything. Great. So let's take a step back and let's talk about when you had that epiphany. Did you look into the market? Were there other products? What was going on at the time? And what did you see from your research that encouraged you to move ahead with the idea?
Sure. So a few things that we did, and I would say research and understanding your customers is important, but I've also seen a lot of hesitancy among people who have like ideas or people who are starting out, where you don't need to be an expert researcher. You need to do a good enough job that your gut assumptions are like checked and you can see if you're on the right path or corrected if they need to be. But you don't have to like be the best in the world at it. I
Mm.
would argue that doing some amount of studies, even if it's possibly flawed or not as good as someone else would do, is better than just going with your assumptions. So what we did is I have this hypothesis that I know from computer vision lands that computers are more accurate than humans at identifying objects and images. That was like a milestone that was reached, and I was aware of it. And I had this hypothesis that it would help the moving industry because it could help the mover become more efficient and more accurate.
Mm.
So I wanted to test it. So what what would someone do if you want to test it? And also, I'm I'm a bit of a shy person, so I'm not the kind of person that really enjoys like talking to a million people. I'll do it if I need to, but like it's not really what energizes me. So before I spoke with anyone, I was trying to just look at large swaths of data. So I went to the Better Business Bureau and I sorted the industries, all the companies there. They grouped them by industry, and I got a data dump and sorted it by complaints. And I was looking at which are the industries that people most complain about. And I
Mm.
saw like diet supplements, airlines, moving companies, like a couple other ones. So I drilled in to say, okay, so people seem to have challenges in the moving industry. Why? So I go in, I started just looking at reading some reviews. And then being an engineer, I dump the reviews into some code and I start pulling out keywords, and inaccurate comes out. Um, bait and switch, price change.
Mm.
And the more I learned about it, the more it seemed like, okay, so people are complaining a lot. Um, I also looked at Yelp, Google reviews, and saw like consistently across the board, people don't really give moving companies 3-star ratings. It's 1 or 5. Everything went great, or everything went horrible, and now we have to go complain about like the laundry list of things that had gone wrong. And the part that I also learned was it seemed to be across the board. There are like any industry, there are good companies, there are less scrupulous ones, there are professionals, there are sloppy ones.
Hmm.
Everyone had one-star reviews. And that's just because what I learned was it's not for lack of trying, it's just really difficult. And people have sometimes ridiculous expectations. They go on Amazon, they buy that $2 toothbrush, and they're like, hey, moving should be the same way, but moving's totally different. There are reasons why it can't. Doesn't matter. Customer has that expectation that like Amazon and Uber and Netflix set for us that I hit the button, I get the result.
Yeah.
So I was learning that, and then now I've got a hypothesis, I have, like, some confidence, but it comes time to check it out. So, the cool part about moving is the market is really fragmented. So, here in the United States, there are 7,000 registered moving companies, and that doesn't count the unregistered ones of, like, a guy with a pickup truck who will come and move you if you ask him to. So, if you wanna go talk to a bunch of companies, you don't usually have to, like, drive far to be able to find a bunch of them. So, we went on Yelp, my co-founder and I, and we just cold called. "Hey, I'm working on this project. I'm doing a little bit of research beforehand. Do you have a minute?" Like, 80% of the time you get hung up on, but I just wanna find, like, some people that would be, interested enough to hear me out. So, I
Mm.
think having that, courage to kinda go outside your comfort zone was really helpful there. And
Mm.
then, most people were not interested. Most people said, "This is crazy. I don't think it'll ever work." But we found a few that were willing to, "Yeah, come on down. Okay, yeah, you can buy me lunch. We can talk about it." And, that was, I feel like, an important step to kind of confirm that this problem was real, is you can learn
Yeah.
so much just by looking at data behind the scenes, but if you go and ask an owner, like, "When's the last time a quote was inaccurate? What happened? Can I" one company even let us put on a polo from their moving company and go, and we did a survey together. He said I was his intern in training, and, I got to actually ride along and sit in the truck with him, go out to the site, look at what he's kinds of questions he's asking about,
Mm.
and, those kinds of insights were helpful. And I feel like at each point in time, you kind of have a hypothesis in your head of how you think the industry works and could be improved, and it's
Mm.
constantly getting, like, refined and iterated and tweaked a little bit as you're learning more. So that initial data research that we did kinda gave the initial hypothesis, and then going and having these, kinda anecdotal stories kind of, like, refined it and added some more color on it. And then at the end of it all, we realized, "Okay, if this is actually gonna work, then it can help a lot of people, but there's 2 big things that we don't know." And that is, can it be done? Or are
Mhm.
we just like in fantasy land? And if it can be done, will the consumer adopt it? Because if someone's not willing to like click the link and go into, hey, this is weird, Ash, I just want you to come to my house, then it doesn't really matter how good the AI is. So I think in hindsight, I think we did a relatively good job kind of tackling one big problem at once and understanding generally in the industry, tactically with a few local companies that'd be willing to like try it out if we had something, and then like, okay, what is the next riskiest thing? How do we de-risk that, de-risk that, de-risk that? I think
Mm.
if we went out of order, it could have not worked out because maybe we would have built the wrong things. We didn't research it. So I think kind of listing out what the most technically riskiest piece is, um, and knocking that one at a time and not getting attracted to the part that's the most fun to work at. I think we all
Yeah.
have biases. If you have a certain background, you want to go do the thing you're good at, but that's not always like what the right order is. So having that kind of like running hypothesis, I think, is helpful. And then also for me, having a co-founder where you've got another person you're like constantly bouncing ideas off of. That
Mm.
way, like, if I do something crazy, then or have like a weird idea that veers off in another direction, you kind of have somebody else who can bounce counter ideas off of you, and you can decide what to do out of the two of those. So I think just
Yeah.
having a lot of exploring in those early days is pretty key.
Yeah, I really like the approach you took. This is one of the, and that is why I love talking to founders. Like, this is the golden nugget for all of my listeners to the show. That if you're launching a product or service, and if you have any background with computer science or IT or data, you can always grab all the feedback in your industry, put them into a sort of like a spreadsheet, and then pick up the keywords as you did, right? It's like you did.
Mhm.
uh, that's amazing because I never heard anyone on my show who did the same thing. So I'm like, okay, that's amazing. This is something, is that something from your book, or is that something which you just came up before this particular startup?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the early days in the book and the different lessons that we learned.
Mm.
So the way the book is structured, I got a copy here. It's called "Grow Up
Hey,
Fast: Lessons from an AI Startup," and the way it works is it's designed to kind of take the lessons that we've learned from starting Yembo and
yeah.
split it up into a way that is helpful for somebody else. So
Mm.
it's organized around lessons. It roughly follows the timeline of the story from like having the idea to making the leap to um, getting your first customers to having your first customers complain that your product is limited to like navigating all these different things. But it's kind of split like lesson by lesson. So in the earlier days, it's more about talking about iteration, customer interviews. Then we go on into prioritization when you've got like a million people asking you for things and you only have a small engineering team. How do you build the right things? And then we focus a bit on to how do you identify a good use case for AI? Because I think it's
Mm.
so powerful in what it does that people sometimes ask to do impossible things. Like the
Yeah.
thing we talked about behind the door. I've actually been asked that from a customer before. Like,
Really?
"Are you working on updates to the AI that can see closed doors?" I'm like, "That's called X-ray vision. It exists in sci-fi, and no, your smartphone can't see through closed doors."
Yeah.
But I mean, it makes sense, right? Is like it's so powerful at what it does, so people just assume it can do
That
certain
it's
things.
really-
But there are strategies and methods you can do to kind of understand, is this going to be a good use case? And I think
Mm.
the key is go a layer beneath and understand how the underlying technology works. So
Sure.
perception algorithms usually look at samples. So if
Mm.
you are going to have a hard time collecting enough representative samples to train an algorithm, it's going to be really hard to make a good detector for that. So just because you saw the AI like count people accurately, or you saw it maybe, I think I got my teeth cleaned a couple of weeks ago at the dentist, and they had some tool where it would take the X-ray and look at like, do you have cavities? Like
Mm.
that works
Mm.
great because there's like a lot of data that you can train on. But if you're going to go make like a, I don't know, like a lunar mining tool that's going to have to go look at sift through lunar dust and find things of interest. Like it's going to be maybe
Yeah.
hard to get realistic samples, and then that use case, even though it's possible in one domain, may be impossible in another.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think really getting like a layer deeper and understanding the core technology that this product's value proposition is built on. Like, is that on solid ground or is that kind of shaky? And then don't spend your time on shaky things because you'll get to a point where it won't be able to be improved and you'll get a lot of angry customers.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Okay, great. So could you give us a sense of the size of the business, the number of customers, size of team, a little bit?
Sure. So we are about 70 folks worldwide now, about half of
Hmm.
that in the US, other half international. We have clients in about 30 different countries. And then this is my favorite metric, so the typical Yembo video is like 20 seconds long. Every day we're processing a couple hundred hours of those videos, identifying the items that are in it, sending it back to the movers. So it's um it's been really interesting. We have customers in pretty much most time zones, so like having to set up infrastructure that never goes down, that is just as fast for someone in Australia, someone in Canada, someone in Europe.
Hmm.
And then how do you make sure that it's like reliable, has been pretty key too, because we're embedding ourselves in someone's sales process. So it's really important that you help people turn around quotes quickly. It needs to work reliably. So we've
Hmm.
put in a lot of effort and energy around that. It's always got to be on. It's not okay to have downtime. So it's
Yeah.
been a long road, but I think we finally have something that's been up and running and got our uptime is published publicly, so anyone can go to yembostatus.com and look at our uptime. And there was a lot of anxiety like 4 or 5 years ago when we first set that up, and we're like, "Hey, are we really ready to make it public yet?"
How
Um,
how
but
long,
uh,
how long it took you guys to get the first version up and running?
so the very first version took about maybe a year or so.
Hmm.
And it was really limited. So I mentioned your first version of your product is going to be bad.
Yeah.
Um, so our first version of the product could detect 5 different items. I think it
Mm.
was a coffee table, sofa, lamp, um, and I think a couple office ones. I think office table, office chair, and then a conference table. Because we were doing a lot of demos to like people, and they'd always say, "Come in my conference room." So we had to make sure AI was good in the conference room.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think the key there was we wanted to have an intellectually honest value proposition to the customer, even though the AI was limited, because we knew it would take time. I mean, I got to get the data, I got to train it, I can work my way up. So now our AI detects over like 250 items, but back in the day when it was five, I needed a reason to exist so that the customer would stick around long enough to give me more data where I can get from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20. And I
Mm,
think that part is also key, is that we knew the limitations of the technology, and we worked the product and the value prop and the pricing and the way that we set everything up so that somebody would get value out of it in its current state, so that you don't have to be like patient and 5 years down the road they'll get enough samples and then this tool will be helpful, but until then it's a waste of time.
mm,
That's not that's not a great value prop. So we realized we were saving drive time. Even if the AI detects zero things, you don't have to get in the car, don't have to burn fuel, don't have to have the like insurance, the mileage racking up on your vehicle. And
mm,
then what we found was when the results come back, a lot of movers were doing things all over the place. Some people used spreadsheet software, some people used pen and paper, some people just kept the tally in their head and gave a price at the end. So by
mm,
building out a tool where they could look at the results, go over the visuals, identify what's there, and give the quote back to the customer, that was actually valuable because most other quoting tools didn't have pictures. It was kind of again all over the place. So
mm.
even though the AI only detected five items in the early days, we were still able to have a reason why someone would want to use the tool. And then maybe it would take 30 minutes to do a review. Then we come out, then we'd analyze and see where are people spending time. Oh, a lot of people are adding um, beds or splitting double beds versus twin beds, or um, people are adding in TVs. So we could actually look at where their pain points were and then prioritize improving the product based on that. So the metric that we were aiming for was review time. So 40 minutes, cool. Now we're down to 35. Now we're down to 30. Now we're down to 20. Now we're down to 10. And that all just came from iteration. And
Yeah,
I feel
yeah,
like the key is that iteration is you need to survive long enough to get through the iterations. And that's why the value prop has got to be there. So a customer who joins isn't hopeful of a future that could be, that they're getting value today. And then that gives you the fuel that you need to kind of keep on iterating and improving and making the product better.
sure, sure. Okay. So tell us more about were this all bootstrap, or did you found some funding also? You raised some funding for this product to launch?
Yeah, so we got it up and running to the point where we felt like it was a viable business. So we got our first customer, we had some product that was working. So that was bootstrapped by I was taking on consulting projects to kind of pay the bills while I was doing that. And
Mm-hmm.
then we did do a seed round and we did a series A to kind of help accelerate things. So I think for those we wanted to grow and expand. So if you look at the property insurance space, I think we wouldn't have been there if we didn't take some strategic money from someone who could make relevant introductions and help with that. So it was. I think if you're looking for advice there, I think the biggest thing that I would suggest is don't just look for dollars. Look for what that fund or investor can do to help. Because I mean, it's tougher now than it was in earlier years, but I mean, if all you need are dollars, there are multiple ways to get that.
Yeah.
But someone who's been there, who's done that, who can help you, who can like operationally help you accelerate the business, I
Mm.
think that is it's harder to put like a tangible dollar amount on, but it can be really helpful. Like there are just doors that people can open if you know the right people, if you've been there before, you can advise. So I think what we did in our early days was we would practice where we would have like a spreadsheet of all these different potential investors we wanted to talk to, and the
Mm-hmm.
ones we were really excited about, who we thought would be like a great fit. We didn't start with them first. We wanted to kind of obviously all of them were um, in the target that like if it worked out we would have been happy. But the ones that you were most excited about, you kind of do a little bit later, get some reps through the system, get some feedback, ask people what worked, what didn't, and then kind of work your way up to the ones that you're really, really excited about.
Mm.
And I think that that approach worked. There's also a lot of there are a lot of resources out there for founders, a lot of local events too. I've noticed a lot of city centers have, like, another San Diego Startup Week here. I think in London there's London Tech Week. There's a lot of different avenues where you can practice your pitch. So you
Mm,
don't have to go through the entire process of having a real one. You can have somebody who's been there before, maybe not actively investing, but like they've raised, and a lot of it is just practice. What kinds of questions come up? What kind of points do you want to focus on that get the message across, but don't like take forever to get to your point and things like that.
yeah,
And I've just noticed there are a lot more resources now that are out there that I kind of wish we had when we were starting, where we had to go and practice like for real with real investors. And there are like pitch fests that you can do, and these all these kind of like communities that have cropped up to, because I think people realize it's tough, they realize it's hard, and a lot of these times you get one chance at doing it. So best to practice and network and try it out with friendly folks before you do it for real.
yeah, yeah. So you know, I'm enjoying this conversation show so much, but unfortunately, we are moving towards the end of the interview. So before we go towards the end, I would like to ask you a couple of questions, which is like, what is the current pricing model if somebody wants to, use your AI software, and what is the procedure, or what is the um, primary way you're generating leads or customers currently for your business?
Sure. So we price on a SaaS model, software as a service. So a like in Slack, they use users is like their billable unit. So the more
Mhm.
users, the more it costs. We have surveys is our unit. So it's free for the end user, the customer, but the service provider who would have had to send someone in the truck otherwise, they're the ones who pay us. And then we have different plans. So if you're going to do like 1,000 Yembos a month, your price per unit will be less than someone who's doing 10 or 100 surveys a month. So we have different plans that are kind of like sized for if you're a small local company, if you're a mid-sized one, or if you're a larger enterprise. And moving is very networked, because it's hard to be a mover in isolation. Like if someone's moving California to UK, they would likely need a partner on the other side of the pond to fulfill the.
Yeah,
So a lot of these movers, they know other movers. So if one of them has a good experience and they have that visual inventory, and they hand it off and say, okay, like you'll unpack it. Here's everything that's there. Um, that's a great referral for us. So we spend a lot of our marketing efforts at trade shows, and going to like industry conferences where people are. Now we have a website, we have inbound, we kind of do all the basic hygiene factors that are needed to run a modern SaaS business. But I think the one that I would say is a bit like unique, that we step on the gas maybe more than some other companies, are these events, because there are very relevant audiences there that are like interested to learn more, and they can try it out. We usually bring furniture and hand people a phone and say, "Hey, go scan it. You can check out the results right away." And it gives people like an opportunity to get familiar with it and make it less of like a big, scary, unknown kind of, what is this AI technology? They can just try it out, ask us if they have any questions, and it makes the on ramp a lot easier.
indeed, indeed. And I guess that the space is more physical in terms of, even though you're into SaaS business, but it's more physical in terms of delivering the value. So it makes more sense to emphasize on events where you can actually practically show them how it works and what the results are. So that's amazing. Great. So before we move to, so we I have this quick fire question round with all of my
Sure.
interviews and the show. But before we move to this quick fire round, I would like to ask you one simple question, which is, throughout your journey and experience, there must have been valuable lessons learned. If you don't mind sharing, could you reflect on your experience and tell us about a mistake or a setback that you encountered along the way that you now consider maybe not a regret but a lessons learned? And additionally, what advice would you give our listener based on that experience?
Sure. I mean, I've done things I regret. It's okay. I think we all do. I think
Mm,
one of the earlier ones that I learned was there are so many problems and so many threats that startups face when you're starting, and a lot of the threats are existential. So you get really good at solving problems. What I regret looking back was so much of a focus on fixing problems and not enough of a focus on celebrating wins.
Hmm.
Um, we had some uh, we had some challenges earlier on where my first few engineers, they weren't always sure if things were not going well. It was very clear what was not going well, who was responsible, what needed to be done. If things were going well, I wasn't giving good feedback. So we'd brainstorm a feature. So and so asked for this. I think we can upsell, and then like it would work. Like a customer enjoys it, they just upgraded their plan, but I would not connect the dots, and I would just move on to the next thing. So then people would say, "Hey, that thing that was so important like 2 weeks ago, what happened?"
Hmm.
Um, and I realized that's not a really great way to run your business because now the people that are actually making the product better and moving things forward don't have that signal around how things are being perceived, and um, people can assume the worst. They assume it's bad. They don't know what what to focus on next. If this was really loved and people enjoyed it, like they should know why, so that the next time they're building something similar, they can like have that feedback. So I make a point now, and it's a lesson from the book as well that celebrating the wins can be more important than fixing the problems,
Hmm.
because you're also choosing what you highlight and what you talk about, and building that culture with your team. And
Yeah.
if you have a culture of just constant firefighting, it's like it'll wear you out. It's stressful, and so I think we make a point now to kind of celebrate these kinds of things because people need to know what did we do that worked well, and I think that's important as a mature leader at a company.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely provides a lot of motivation and appreciation to the team to work on something which they're part of. So it's always a good idea. Great. So we should wrap up now. So we are going to go into the lightning round. I've got
Sure.
six quick fire questions for you. So just answer them as quickly as you can. You ready?
Ready? Yeah, let's do it.
What's one of the best pieces of business advice you have received?
Ship early. Don't wait till you have everything perfect. Get it out
Mm,
there, get customer feedback, and let that be your North Star to refine.
awesome. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
Zero to One by Peter Thiel, because it
Mm,
talks about getting something off the ground. I feel like operating is a very different skill set than initiating something, and it's one of the most succinct, concise, helpful books that I've read on going from nothing to something.
nothing to something. Yeah, makes sense. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
I would say a problem-solving mentality. You run into so many different hurdles and setbacks, and you're expected to do a lot of things that you've never done before. But rather than letting that overwhelm you, like breaking the problem down and solving it and doing one step at a time, making things that could be big bet the farm scenarios, like make small reversible decisions when you can. I
Mm,
think good problem-solving skills can kind of make challenging, daunting tasks much more manageable.
indeed, indeed. What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
I This is going to be really simple, but I've tried every productivity tool out there that I can think of: Trello, Jira, Asana, Monday. I email myself stuff. Use
Mm,
inbox zero. If it's still in your inbox, you still need to handle it. And if I
mm,
have like an idea in the middle of the night, I wake up and you email yourself stuff. It's the only tool I find myself I keep coming back to. Is like for better or for worse, we're in our inboxes all day, every day anyway, so you don't have to like remember to log into it. But you're probably half the emails I send are to myself.
indeed, indeed. I like it too. I send myself or schedule emails to myself when I need to remember something. Not the alarmic remembrance, like pick up the daughter from the
Mhm.
school. That's not what I send. I send something like, plan a trip to a
Oh, that's
city
cool.
at
So
some
you'll
point.
schedule it to yourself so it gets
Yeah,
delivered like when it's
it
okay. Can
sets
I
me
borrow
back.
that idea? Do you charge for this advice or can I do that too? That's a cool idea.
Come on, take it away. So yeah, that's really good. Okay, my next question: what's a new or a crazy business idea you would love to pursue if you had the time?
I think the as a founder progresses in their career, the size and the scale of the problems that they're solving should increase. So I would love to do something. on a global scale. I mean, we have clients in multiple countries and things like that, but I think if time is of no concern and we can go tackle big things, I'd love to figure out what to do with all this carbon dioxide we're putting in the atmosphere. I mean, you can debate whether or not humans are causing it, but I feel like you can't debate that it's there. And I feel like figuring out clever things to do with it. I have a gut feeling that there's something there, but maybe a problem for another day. I got my hands full now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
Think most people don't know, I grew up with llamas. I spent some time
Ooh.
living in Vermont, and I was vice president of my local 4-H club. And people generally just assume, I think, because of my background, that I'm a tech guy. I live in a city, but if you ever need help shearing a llama, I can help you with that. And I like to spend a lot of time in nature as well. I like to go camping and do these kinds of things on weekends. But it's kind of fun to focus on the tech stuff and then just like be off in the middle of nowhere, completely off grid, camping and things too. So I try to straddle those two worlds.
Yeah, I like that so much. Yeah, we do have places where we go with my family, and where we have a rule: all the phones inside the house. Everything what
Mhm.
we do outside, like barbecue and everything, no phones. So, well, sounds
That's great.
pretty.
And I found
Great.
when you're camping, it's fun too. Like, it almost takes me some time. Like, I'll reach in my pocket even though there's no phone there, and it's like you have to like detox. It takes some energy to
Indeed.
get there.
Great stuff. Great. Well, Zach, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story and backing the last years of building this business and some of the ups and downs. If people want to check out Yembo, what they have to do, what's the website, what they should search?
Sure. Yeah, you can go to yembo.ai, or
Mhm.
Google it. Will show up. Part of the reason why I picked the Yembo name was it didn't mean anything, so we can get to number one on Google really easily. And then I'm on LinkedIn is like the social media I'm most active on. So if you look up Zach Ratner, um,
Mhm.
there's links to Yembo, links to the book website, all those fun things in there. So that's what I recommend is go to Yembo or go to LinkedIn.
Perfect. Perfect. Zach, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey and impactful work you're doing through Yembu. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Founders Podcast.
Thank you, Ash. Happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank you all for tuning into the episode of our Founders Podcast today. I hope you found our conversation with Zach insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast and stay updated on our future interviews with proven founders and industry experts. We have a lineup of incredible guests and valuable insights coming your way. Stay inspired, stay motivated, and keep building.